In a second-hand set of dimensions, on an astral plane that was never meant to fly, through wavering star mists, see the Great Atuin. Drifting onwards through space, atop the shell of the world's turtle, are 4 giant elephants, upon whose broad shoulders rests the Discworld. Welcome to Dining Table Discworld. We're reading through the Discworld novels and discussing them at our dining table. Be aware there will be spoilers for the current book and others in the series.
Hello, welcome to Dining Table Discworld. I'm Dave.
I'm Kathy.
And today we are talking about the second of what could be arguably said to be the Uberwald duology. We are talking about The Fifth Elephant, published in 1999, which is also one of Kathy's favourite Discworld books, so this might go on a while.
Possibly.
So, Kathy, what's our synopsis?
The Watch continues to expand with a traffic division and fast citywide communication using the new semaphore-based Klax technology. Vimes is reluctantly sent to Uberwald as ambassador for Angua to attend the crowning of the dwarfish Low King. Could this be linked to the recent unrest among local dwarves and the theft of a replica dwarvish ceremonial object from Angua Museum? Meanwhile, Angua is suddenly called away by an old friend from back home, and Carrot resigns his post to go after her with only a plucky talking dog for help. This leaves Fred Colon in charge of the Watch, with disastrous consequences. In Uberwald, Vimes is out of his element and away from the law, aware that the world is watching. But while he's dealing with dwarves, protocol, vampires, diplomacy, werewolves and lies, Vimes is asked to consult on an underground crime, and the link to home is severed when the Klax is sabotaged. Vimes is just trying to keep his people safe in a society that's hostile to them, and detests how much it's all playing politics. But even after he's rescued from the deadliest game, Vimes has a murderous werewolf to deal with, and will anyone be prepared to tell him the truth, and the whole truth?
There is a lot going on here.
Yes.
So, do you want to start?
So yes, this was, as you say, my favourite. I think when I went to university, which was when the Discworld books were still coming out, and I did join Discsoc, this is what I mentioned as my favourite of the Discworld books. I am not surprised reading it again that it was. I do like the witch books as well. And I think this one also, I suddenly realised why I kept thinking in the last few watch books we'd read, where's Lady Sybil? It's because this book is one where she's back, so that's really great. Have a soft spot for it, and as we keep finding with these, various things seem still maybe even more relevant than when I read them.
Yes. I think this is one on the other hand, I don't think I read as much because I remembered nothing, but nothing was new. You get what I mean? It's like
kind of.
Yeah, I didn't. If you sat down before I started reading the book and asked me to tell you what the plot was,
or even who done it.
Yeah, I've got not a clue.
No, I remember all that.
When reading it, nothing felt new.
Like it was all familiar.
Yeah, and it would have been read at least once, most likely twice, but many years ago. But no, it didn't stop it being enjoyable. But it's a little bit more new for me. Okay, so where shall we start?
I think we first need to just have a brief comment on the pronunciation of a certain baked good that is featured quite prominently in the book. So there's a certain type of food that
biscuit.
No, that. Sometimes rhymes with cone and sometimes rhymes with gone, and there are, I think, various implications for whichever one you use. And I know which one I used as a child, and also that I think at least one occasion I was told that was the wrong way. So I'm talking about the scone of stone, which is the dwarf artefact, and it's basically the, I guess, dwarf bread, but scone, that is used to, I say, crown the Low King, I guess, throne the Low King. It's the ceremony.
It's a ceremonial.
It's the coronation seat.
Yeah.
And obviously, is based on the stone of Scone.
Yes.
Which is the Scottish ceremonial throning stone that was stolen by the English, obviously, and then I think was it like some people stole it back at some point in
it's got
a while
stolen
ago.
A few times.
But anyway, so Scoon's in there as well, but I've discounted that as not the name of baked good. That's clearly what the reference is.
Yeah.
Now, I would actually pronounce that baked good as scone, but that doesn't rhyme with stone.
No.
Which is the joke. But it's only really called the scone of stone at the beginning, and then it's just called the scone the full way through.
Yes.
So I'm probably just going to go back and forth, because if left to my own devices, I will probably just say scone. So
yeah,
I just thought I'd say that to start off with. It's like a whole thing in like England, I guess, but A lot of things are, I'll not worry.
For our American listeners, a scone is equivalent to a sweet biscuit. And biscuit when you're talking about gravy and biscuits.
Oh, okay. Like I know cookies what we call biscuits.
Yes.
But you wouldn't put gravy on a scone.
You definitely wouldn't. You put jam and cream on a scone.
Yeah, and then the order of that also has quite a thing, particularly if you're whichever bit of the West Country, that's the thing.
But the kind of...
Why do we have so much baggage around this particular food?
I don't know. But the kind of the texture and the kind of the closest equivalent would be a sweet biscuit that you have in biscuit and gravy in the...
But you can have cheese scones. That's what I often make, which isn't sweet.
But an American biscuit is usually savoury.
I don't think actually that's what that was. Okay. Basically, there are a lot of words for this thing just in this one country we're in, let alone anywhere else. It's going on to the actual content of the book.
It's in the book.
I mean, it is in the book. And I mean, in all honesty, Pratchett books, there's a lot of how things are pronounced and a lot of stuff around if people only read words and don't hear them said. But we'll talk about the clacks.
Yes.
As the new technology, because I think, even though I wish I knew the clacks in it because the book was familiar, I'd sort of forgotten this is how soon the sort of industrial revolution type stuff, except it's not industrial, it's communication.
Yes.
It is in it. But one thing I did notice is, because the start of the book is actually one of the ones we've had in a while, it's actually the sort of celestial, turtle and elephant.
Well, I mean, you have to mention the elephants because the whole point of
the fifth elephant.
Yes.
There's a bit where, sort of zooming in, Pratchett talks about the ox carts going on the plains, and he mentions heliographs.
Yeah.
Which, because it uses light, and that's how they communicate, because these columns like days long.
Yeah.
It says passing the word, which sort of feels like it then... I was thinking, does that presage the clacks? But then the clacks is there almost right away, so I don't know. But wasn't that something like Napoleon was going to use, and it didn't quite catch on? But some people think that's like if this technology is taken over type of thing. I think it's a little niche, but I'd heard of it this time at least, whereas I don't think when I read this before I had.
The clacks is based on a real world, round world technology. Obviously we'll go into this more when we do the book on the clacks, but there was actually people were using them to play the markets.
Oh, okay.
When they first came about.
Okay.
Yeah, because people realised you could get information from major financial centres quicker than the actual official information was coming by horse at that point.
Okay, yeah, that's right. We'll talk like this, yes.
But yes, this is another. I think
it's different to heliograph though, which is also mentioned very briefly and feels like a slight reference to something else that could have been the thing, but he's gone with this.
I think this is one of those where it adds drops an interesting bit of tidbit of world building that later on we come back to.
Well, yeah, because the first bit is colon showing someone the use of the semaphore that he's signalling his traffic team to unclamp a cart, and he sort of sights the closest tower, holds up the baton, does some semaphore. So there is still I'm sort of imagining it's a bit. I think Pratchett uses ping pong as like a simile.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's actually the same, but I kind of imagine it a bit like ping pong, or like those batons that I think people in airports would have, which is probably old fashioned now. I assume computers tell planes.
No, they still.
They still have a person with a thing.
Yeah, still
Oh, they'll probably be replaced by AI in a minute though. Actually, let's hope not.
No, you still kind of need someone to physically move aircrafts around, so...
But the thing is, he sort of shows them it goes to the tower, and then the tower, which is manned by gargoyles, who we already know are part of the watch, but they're on tower, so they do the thing. But it's slightly ruined by the fact that the team were just down the street, and he could have shouted at them. It's a little bit like somebody going, look at what this thing can do, and then trying to use walkie-talkie in the same room as you, and you're like, oh, you can hear me. It's like, yes, I can hear you.
It is one of those classic, this technology is amazing, and then the demonstration kind of go, well, I could have done that,
It's like show that, but it sort of mentions how the watch are using it, and they have, I think each of the kind of watch houses, I think, has a team that does that. They also mention the pigeons as well, so they're getting messages from further away with pigeons. It's interesting with whenever you have fancy books have like pigeons or birds doing stuff. It's like, well, actually, people must be sending the birds in coaches somewhere because the whole point is they home, so you have to have pigeons from different places. But anyway, no one ever goes into that very much. But then when Vimes is travelling to Uberwald, he's considering the fast pace of technology because he's travelling in a carriage, but you can see the main carriage route has these clacks towers along. And it's interesting because it just seems to have appeared. Because what was the last Angua book we had?
Referencing.
You could just look at the shelf behind you.
I could, but I've got it in front. Jingo.
I mean, there's none of this.
3 books ago.
Yeah. And there's talk about how there's sort of thinking about how old people sometimes pop out of a restaurant to go check their Clax messages. So there's obviously stations around the place where you can go or kiosks where you can go and check your messages, which does feel quite 90s.
Yeah.
In sort of like, I suppose, going to the phone and checking your answering service.
Yeah.
Although I guess when he wrote this, like, email was just starting to be a thing. But you have to go to a computer to check it. So, rather than sitting down for a meal, people are letting this technology interrupt them. I'm like, well, it's only going to get worse.
Yeah. I think that, he obviously talks about because there's a lot of money in the clacks. So that they are actually very quickly, because they're being very quickly made.
It mentions the company, doesn't it?
Yes, because you can once they've got a clacks tower up, they can very quickly start making money off of it to then fund the next Clax Tower. And they're very rapidly.
Yeah, we also see the inside of a Clax Tower, which is obviously a slightly sort of spare kind of living place for, I think, 3 people who are, manning it and crewing it. But there's like a flare, so if something goes wrong, they can send up a thing, because obviously they're in a line, so if one stops, it's like a blockage, everything's stopped past that point. But it says the company doesn't like it, and they go out and sort things out. And the fact that as you go into Uberwald, which is more kind of uncivilized wildernessy type place, the Clax Towers start having they start looking a bit more fortified.
Yes,
kind of bases made of stone and.
Yeah, that's the thing. The ones around Mount Morpeth are just basically
a tower.
A tower made out of wood. Whereas as they get along, but you can throw them up pretty quickly and start making money off it.
I think it's commented at one point that all the things already existed. It was just that thing of bringing them together, which again feels like various things.
Yes.
So the other thing I thought we'd talk about is dwarf culture stuff. Well, there's a few dwarf things we're going to talk about. I thought we talked about the dwarf cultural stuff, and then there's some other dwarf stuff we'll get to later, just to kind of split it up a bit.
There are many dwarf stuff in this book.
Yes. So this is the first we hear of the Low King, and in fact, it's kind of good that Vimes is quite ignorant, because then Carrot explains part of it to him, Cheery explains most of it to him at different points, but there's a bit where Vimes and Carrot are out, and then they round the corner. There's clearly the aftermath of a massive brawl with a load of dwarfs. And Vimes is immediately take names, figure out what happened. And Carrot's like, no one saw anything. And Vimes is like, well, go ask them, how do you know that? He's like, no, none of these dwarves will have seen anything. So again, it's this kind of idea of community policing, in that they've got a population that the Watch leadership doesn't know. Carrot's obviously second in command of the Watch and is a dwarf by adoption, so he does know it. But this idea that it's like, well, no, this is an internal matter, it's not part of Ankh-Morpork's laws.
No.
It's like, but people are brawling in the streets. So Vimes like, well, this is breach of the peace, so actually it is our business.
Yeah.
And I think when Carrot first says Low King, Vimes like, isn't king just a word for like chief engineer?
Well,
or chief
mine supervisor.
Mine supervisor. Because that's part of the joke, is that Carrot's father was a king.
Yes.
But he, ran the mine. Basically, then there's a sort of dwarvish sectarianism, for want of a better word.
Yeah.
I guess. And the Low King elections brought up a lot of stuff, because there's a very big discussion about what's a dwarf, and there's kind of a conservative and a liberal sort of view.
I'd hardly call it's a conservative and a less conservative view.
It depends how you look at it, but I think at one point the word liberal is used.
Yeah, I think that
but more liberal, in terms, in the context of dwarf, dwarf culture. So the conservative dwarves are referred to by Cheery, who we're taking to be very liberal.
Yes.
As something which is Dradakak, which means they do not get out in the fresh air enough. Which I thought was quite funny, because nowadays would be a bit like they need to touch some grass.
Yeah.
But it's the idea that these are very traditional dwarfs who believe that even seeing the sun means you aren't a dwarf anymore. Dwarves live underground and they have to stay underground. Now, I sort of assume that, because you can only grow a limited amount of things underground, so I'm sure there's various things, including the ingredients for beer, that have to be traded in. But I imagine that's a little bit like various religious groups who will get people who aren't of that religion to do things for them to get around the religion observances. Yeah. That's always the thing that exists. It's like, well, we aren't allowed to do these things, but these things do need to be done. So we'll find a group of people to do that. It doesn't go into that, but that just sort of occurred to me. But some believe that being above ground or having any interaction with humans means you aren't a dwarf anymore. And those dwarves live in the mountains.
Yes.
And Uberwald seems to be a big area of them. And then they also mention Copperhead as being the biggest dwarf city, because that's the big mountain. I'm assuming the idea is that whole mountain is a dwarf mine.
Yeah.
Copperhead sounds like it's a little bit more progressive, but I mean, it's still a traditional dwarf mine, and maybe there's some mixed feelings there. We don't see it because we don't see that bit. But then it's pointed out that this causes some disagreements in the biggest dwarf city outside of Copperhead. And Vimes like, oh, is that Summer? And it's like, no, it's Ankh-Morpork. And he's like, that can't be right. It's like, no, it's Ankh-Morpork. And this is the point. Ankh-Morpork is a human-built city, but its dwarf population is so large that it is the second biggest dwarf city on the disc.
Yeah.
And all the dwarves there don't believe that being above ground or, having an interaction with humans is some sort of thing that makes you not a dwarf anymore, because, of course, they're dwarves. It's very nuanced, and this is the thing, and it's explained quite well through different conversations. There's a bit where Vimes says why the dwarves think they don't have a religion, being a dwarf is a religion. And the thing is, it does feel a lot like various religion, like bits and pieces of different religious and cultural groups that, again, in the UK are a minority, but do exist and have their own things going on, that probably goes a little bit below the kind of general, traditional English stuff. Like the stuff that people tend to focus on, and you're like, oh, well, that's just, that community's thing.
Yeah.
But then you look into it, it's like, there's a lot to it. Yeah, you've got that. So I think Ankh-Morpork kind of ends up being a more liberal dwarf city just because the dwarves are there. But there are what they kind of refer to as the deep down dwarves, which is this lot who go about in stand chairs and cover themselves up. So they're covered all over, which sounds like one thing. They also perhaps seem to have quite pointy hats, which feels like another thing. So there's a lot of visual stuff coming into this that sort of
pulling from
feels
a few
contradictory, but I think it's its own thing. Sometimes it's a bit like, well, why should you care what these people think? You're still dwarves. Obviously you're dwarves, what? But then Cheery goes into all these traditions they have, and it kind of relates to legal and ceremonial purposes. So a lot of these very traditional dwarves are part of, it's not a priesthood, because it's not a religion, except, it's culturally incredibly important.
Yeah.
And it's this idea that stuff like legal stuff, ceremonial stuff, marriages, land stuff, inheritance is all administered by this group of not priests. So the Low King election has been quite fraught, because depending on who got the thing, it would either be somebody who was quite conservative and traditionalist, and they did think might have actually said, a lot of these people aren't dwarves, compared to somebody who's seen as a bit more forward-thinking and liberal.
Yeah.
Or at least liberal for a dwarf. There are dwarves in Ankh-Morpork who've been born there. They've never been to the mountains, but that's still back home. It's always back home, which again, that's when you're, an immigrant population, even if you're, a few stages, a few generations down from the initial migration, there's still the strong cultural sense. And again, he just does this all so well. I remember reading it as a teenager and being like, oh, yeah, but probably not realising the depth to it.
I think the key to it is it doesn't come as an info dump. It's seeded throughout the book. You get chunks of it throughout, but it's not. You don't get. It's well presented as well. So it's not just a.
Yeah.
Here's an encyclopedia entry on dwarfist culture.
Well, no, because there's Carrot explaining some stuff to Vimes in the context of Vimes about what's happening, and Vimes hearing it, but Vimes is being told it.
Oh, yeah, but this is the point.
And then later Cheery explains things a couple of times, because the other thing she explains about is about the knocker men. Yeah. So this is the thing. So there was this, again, the pointy hats, and I think the very heavy male thing is the knocker men, and Cheery actually had a brother who was one and lost it. So the idea of this is that obviously if you're mining, there are pockets of gas that are explosive, and so flame will kill you, but also how you see. And the conservative dwarves, that's very much like a thing they have. So the knockmen used to go down and they'd have all this heavy mail and stuff to try and protect them in an explosion, but they go down and try and find out what the pockets of gas were, and basically potentially blow themselves up for the good of the community to keep mining. So it's very much this kind of sacrificial role. And the idea is that no one marries knockmen because you don't know if they're going to come back, and so you're taking yourself out of part of the community for the good of the community. And so they're very revered and honoured and stuff. And again, Cheery said she had a brother that was one and who died in the course of it. But then about 50 years earlier, a human invented a safe kind of lamp that would basically turn a different colour.
Would turn blue.
In the presence of the gas, and then you'd know, and you could.
But it wouldn't explode.
But it wouldn't explode. Well, because I think there was also some sort of mesh. And apparently, and this caused a war 50 years ago. And I was like, when was this? And she was like, oh, most humans don't know about it. And she said, maybe a couple of houses fell into holes, because they literally, dwarf war is basically undermining. They're just going and collapsing each other's minds and things. Dwarfish law is its own kind of thing, and had the Low King been the one who didn't like Ankh-Morpork, didn't like humans, didn't like above ground, it might have caused this massive schism. And another war in which I'm guessing nothing would have been safe. But, yeah, and Vimes just didn't know any of this, because why would he? But on the other hand, at least he's got officers in the watch who can explain it to him.
Yeah, no, that's, it's a lot of stuff there to, the idea that the knocker men, traditional groups, even though you had this safe lamp, would still do it the old-fashioned way, would still take a bird. It's their tradition. Take a bird, effectively a canary, down with them. And poke invisible pockets of gas with a flame on a stick, because that is the way you did it. That is the dwarfish way.
There was also the idea that if you went deep enough, you could hear things. You could hear these mythical. So we hear, I think it's Aggie Hammer Thief, isn't it? Yeah. Which is kind of at one point a dwarf says it to Vimes, and then Carrot's a bit like, no, that's just a mythical person. And Vimes like, did he just say like Sweet Fanny Adams to me? It's like, well, but I think it's more than that. It's that you might hear these spirits
when you're wandering the mine shafts, the
potentially going to your death
on your own. You just with a canary and a bit of fire.
Yeah,
your mind's going to do strange things.
Yes, and also there's the idea that maybe you can get deep enough and you can hear the pulse of the elephants.
Yes,
also, like if you've gone down through the disc.
We should really mention briefly what they're mining. Because
so in the Uber, I mean, they're mining various things. They are mining, yes, and obviously gold is
the important one. But in
I think most minerals
in Uberwald, though, it is fat. It is fat from the fifth elephant. It's supposedly.
So the fifth elephant thing's quite interesting. The idea is that you had there's the four elephants at the back of the turtle. The idea was there's a fifth elephant that slipped off, somehow orbited around and crashed into the disc way back in prehistory, which is a little bit like... So there's this hypothesis of a giant impact, a planet impacted with what was Earth, smashed into it, became Earth, and the stuff that kind of shot off that then became the moon.
Yes, it's...
I think it's called Thea or something. Yeah. But so it kind of starts as cosmology and goes into like geology. But yes, the idea is that the bones of the fifth elephant are iron, but the fat is the fat of the elephant.
Yes, so they're mining fats, different types of fat, with different variations of BCBs, which are burnt crunchy bits.
And there's also, so when Veterinary tells Vimes he has to go and be the ambassador, which Vimes is like, what? The idea is that, Angua pork needs Vimes like, clearly it's about resource, it's about trade, what's happening. Yeah. It's like, no, it's fat. It's like, do you know how many candles this city consumes?
Yes.
And he's like, don't we just make this from tallow? He's like, not most of them, though.
Not enough. I think it's an interesting thing that it's another example of sometimes it's not the obvious things that trade revolves around or is important trade. It's, in this situation, it's fat is more important than the gold, the mineral wealth.
Iron.
It's like those are important, but it is, without candles...
Yes,
you're not getting anywhere. It isn't just standard.
Yes, again, and there's kind of in the Uberwald thing. There's this idea that the fifth elephant is also has a lot of meanings as a phrase, and sometimes it is sort of surprise, and it is or something unexpected, or something made up that isn't really real. Like, people think it exists, but it doesn't. This is all very relevant for the whole book, which I think I quite got all the symbolism of that when I read it when I was younger. But there's various points where, and then when Vimes gets involved with, like, he goes into the big dwarf mine where the Low King is, because, it was the more progressive Low King who was elected. I say elected. I think it's like a small group of people elect the Low King. It's not. Well, it's not democracy. It's more. Well, I'm going to mention the Holy Roman Empire later as well, but something of that nature.
I think it's the can you gather a consensus around somebody enough to get you get the
Pope.
Yeah, you get the majority behind them. I think the Pope is not bad. In a lot of respects, you end up with someone who the most people don't hate, kind of.
Yes, it's always going to be a compromise.
Yeah, and definitely the Low King in the book is definitely somebody who most of the people doing in that position don't dislike them strong enough to vote against them, kind of thing.
Yeah, against him. So it's Rhys Rhysson, who is not from Uberwald, which seems to be more conservative, or Cophead or Angua pork, which seem more mixed and more progressive. Reese is from quite a small community in Clamados, which, if we remember, is Discworld, Wales.
Yes, which is not surprising given Wales is strong mining history for them for Pratchett to have a
and I think
dwarf culture there.
When I'd read it before, I'd sort of understood that it was Wales, but hadn't, because he doesn't do the things with the L's like in soul music with Buddy's accent, but Reese is always saying, something or other, see, and he's always doing that. And I think I didn't quite hear that in my head when I read it as a kid, but now I'm reading it and I'm like, it's that sort of slight, which, again, not everyone in Wales does, but it is part of the accent or the kind of way of speaking in at least parts of Wales. It's also the fact that Cheery makes a point that, this one's nice, or kind of suggesting it was one of them softer or more of a pushover. Yeah. It's like, no, in order to be low-king, you have to be pretty ruthless.
Yeah.
And I think the idea is that Vimes is going in and going, this one must be bad because he doesn't like humans and animal pork. And it's like, that doesn't make him bad. He just doesn't particularly... It's like, Reese doesn't like you either. He just doesn't think your existence is, like, anathema.
Yeah.
So...
He tolerates you. There's a difference.
Yeah. Yes. So basically the scone is stolen, and this happens after a replica of the scone, which is in the Dwarf Bread Museum in Ankh-Morpork, which Carrot takes Vimes to initially, and that's how we get some of the background of it, was stolen. And then also the owner of a rubber mould factory was killed. And so Vimes is...
We'll talk more about him later.
Yes. And Vimes like... And then... When him and Cheery are scoping out, bear in mind that Cheery is his best seen of the crime officers. Yeah. And because at first, like, no, we don't want any dwarves involved. And then Cheery shares various things, and Vimes is like, well, that's not what I thought, but that does tell me how a dwarf would think about it. There's also a little bit of a thing, which is like I think about, it says about dwarves don't ignore sex, as in the act rather than and gender, which we'll get to dwarf and stuff later. But it doesn't seem to be important to them. And I remember thinking, so Castellandra is very unusual for a dwarf.
Yes.
But that does... The early Discworld stuff was very much like there were several of these dwarves, not like other dwarves. We're like, what are the other dwarves like? We've just seen these guys.
Yes.
Because there's the whole thing with dwarf opera, which is a big thing. There's these legendary stories of Blood Axe and Ironhammer, kind of about this sort of mythical founding of, I think, dwarfdom as like a kingdom, or the starting of the low king as tradition, and it's also about the like baking of the scone. Lady Sybil knows it because they did this very important opera, which I mean is actually, I feel like dwarf opera and Klingon opera, in my head they're quite similar.
I think they are. They can go on. Their loud shouting can go on for a long time, and many weapons are involved.
Yes, but it turns out that Lady Sybil knows it because when she was in preparatory school, she actually sang one of the lead roles, which is interesting because that must have been an all-girl school doing something that's from an all-male culture. But there's a bit where Sybil says something about being romantic, and Vimes like, wait, were they... But wait, which one was... And Sybil's like, well, they're both dwarves. And that's the interesting thing, is that dwarves are all he... We're going to just memory hole Carrot's mother. And in fact, I think he mentioned stepmother once, and equally it's like, or I think one of the watch books mentions a wife after a dwarf's killed, but we're just ignoring that for now. But yes, it's the idea, well, they're both, they were partners romantically or in life. But yes, there's this whole thing where at one point it's considered that dwarves don't really see sex as particularly important, gold and songs are more about that, but that they are very emotional about the whole thing in this song, which yes, at one point Lady Sybil uses this to her advantage, or to their advantage, in that she starts singing the song, all these dwarves were coming to arrest them and confiscate the scone after it's found. It's complicated. So she sings the song, and there's a precedent. They're going to carry it to the Low King, which is what was done. And at one point, one character is compared to the sort of traitorous character, and loads of dwarves are listening, so they can't really argue because it's like there's no precedent for this, and it's like yes, there is. Yes. The Vimes at one point considered something about how the dwarves don't really seem particularly. They ignore sex. You need it to make more dwarves, but it's not really the important part. Although there is that kind of leads a little bit into a thing where. So with the rubber maker, the rubber maker was a guy called Wallace Sonkey, who was pushed into his own vat, and we get a suggestion of what came out.
Yes.
But there's the idea of a pack of Sonkeys, and basically they keep calling them preventatives, but basically it's that these are condoms.
Yeah.
And there's quite a funny bit where they go to. Well, it's actually after Vimes has left, but I think Red Shoe goes to interview the troll worker that doesn't really understand it, but most employees are women, and they're always laughing. Because, of course, the way you make gloves is you dip a hand mould in. The way you make boots is you dip well, I guess not a foot mould, but a boot mould in. And so, yeah. But one point earlier, Vimes describes him as a national hero, and Carrot says, well, some people have views.
Yeah.
And I'm like, is it Carrot that has views or dwarfs that do? But we'll get onto that later. But yes, this idea that, like, sex isn't important to them, but maybe there's some sort of prudishness there, or is that kind of Carrot?
Possibly. It's difficult to say, really, but I mean, Carrot is his own bag of problems.
We're going to get to that bag of problems. Shall we go through some characters now? We'll start with Colon and the sugar, and then Nobby and the Union.
This is an example of a man who gets promoted too far above where he's comfortable.
The whole point, as has been said many times before, is that Sergeant Colon is Sergeant through and through. He just threw him like a stick of rock. But then, Vimes goes, but it's temporary. He's just going to be ambassador for the coronation, and he's coming back in a bit.
Leaving Carrot in charge.
That's fine. Captain Carrot, he's the second in command of the watch.
Yeah.
But the thing is that Vimes takes with him, it was going to be Angua. She races off. We'll get to that. But he takes detritus, who's also a sergeant. And so the only sergeant left is Colon, who becomes captain of the watch.
Acting captain of the watch.
Yes. So Colon, who at the beginning, literally, as well as showing the semaphore, also shows how crooked he is, because somebody basically offers him ice cream to get the clamp removed from their cart.
I mean, the man. He is a stereotype of a certain type of police officer.
I've read that Pratchett said that, like, every precinct or army barracks, wherever it is, everyone would come up to him and, like, they had a colon and knobs, and they'd always come up to him and go, you got them exactly right. And I think he said he was once told this by somebody who was clearly the knobs of that particular group.
And I think with any large organisation, you do end up with these. And the thing is, he's crooked, but he's not maliciously crooked.
Well, the thing I think, there's one bit, he was talking to this restaurant guy who was trying to kind of get around it by saying, like, he knew secrets, people think waiters don't have ears, and then Carl's like, I know a lot of things too, and it's only when he bribes with ice cream he does it. And I wasn't quite sure if when he said I know a lot of things too, it was that the restaurateur was saying he had something on Colon, or was Colon just saying, well, I also know things and that's not what I want. But, the thing is, Colon's in quite a cushy position with this. He is now head of the traffic division.
Yes.
Which is described, it's a lot of road enforcement, there's clamping. You don't see, it's clamping gone. I don't feel like you ever see it anymore. I remember as a kid, you'd sometimes see clamps on cars.
It's less.
I feel like I've not seen one it's got to be at least 15 years, maybe 20.
No.
Maybe more.
These days they'll just send you a parking ticket after the fact.
Because I feel like it's something you'd occasionally see. And that was clearly a thing that was set up by Vetinari as a kind of thank you for what happened in Jingo. And there's a way of kind of keeping, I guess, Colonel Nobbs occupied.
But I think as well it was to try.
It kind of funded itself. They've got a speed camera with an imp.
But I think it was also trying to keep the traffic moving within Morpok. I think the increased number of carts in the city, you end up with if you park one in the wrong place. Or, I think it's...
I mean, I'm all for traffic enforcement, this. Traffic and parking enforcement, I feel there should be more.
I think it's Vetinari. It's going, well, we need somebody to do this. This is a little bit of a thankless task, but also it just needs somebody to...
Well, I don't know, I'm not sure it's a thankless task, because there's also an element of the... Because Vimes, when it was announced, is a bit like, they're getting a thanks for something, because it's something that's quite clear-cut, but also it kind of funds itself.
Yes. I think it does make sense as something that Morpok would need as it grows.
Yes, but I think it's more of a plum job than that. But what happens is Colon immediately becomes incredibly paranoid, and because he knows all the tricks, he sort of assumes everyone's doing them, and he basically drives out all the watchmen. Like, he says, don't eyeball me, and he's like, no one's looking at you. It's like, I don't think people can't earhole me or nostril me. And then he thinks people put the things in their tea. He's like, stirred with a spoon. I know that one too. And then he starts getting obsessed with the sugar cubes.
Yes.
It's this descent of madness, really, isn't it? It's.
I think it's and there's this big pile of Vimes had a big pile of paperwork on his desk just because
Vimes would just leave things.
Carrot was working on a separate desk, but would have done the paperwork.
I think Carrot's probably taking little bits off and dealing with them.
Carrot just kind of burns it all because it's not there. It's dealt with.
Yeah, I mean, it's a method, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think Carrot was a bit like, some of those pals were starting to feel like friends when he came back and realised. But yes,
I think it's he does.
He just becomes tyrannical really, really fast.
And I think the worst thing he then does is, because obviously he needs another sergeant. And there's Nobby, putting up with a lot of his rubbish, putting up with, because he's his friend.
Which he always does do, yeah.
And then, when Colonel's talking about, we need another sergeant, well, Nobby's going, well, here I am, someone, and
he doesn't say I, that's the problem.
No, but then Colonel just promotes...
one of the trolls.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the worst thing he does is he starts saying a load of stuff that's quite offensive also. Like, he says some stuff to some dwarf officers that sounds quite rude. And he's like, but Vimes can do that. And it's all this thing, this idea that they kind of... Maybe Vimes has standing to do that, which I think feels a little bit old-fashioned now. It's a bit like, well, if that's rude, like, it's rude for anyone to say. But I think there's an element of a bit like... It feels more offensive when Colon does it.
I think Colon's doing it Colon was being offensive with it,
yes.
Whereas Vimes... You felt that Vimes had a certain degree of respect, even though he used a derogatory term. There was a certain...
Yeah, which, I mean, this is the bit that feels perhaps a little bit old-fashioned. It's a bit like, actually, you shouldn't... It's like, oh, no, it's right.
You should say these things.
It's a bit like, yeah, you shouldn't use slurs. And people are like, oh, but some people are okay to use slurs because they got the respect of everyone. And like, maybe it's... And I think there's always this feeling among some people. It's like, oh, well, people just find new reasons to be offended, or they'll be offended if they don't like it, but it's a way of getting at somebody, like it's personal. And it's like, well, actually, it is personal, but you're the one that used a word that wasn't great. And so that is a bit that feels a little bit outdated to me, but I think there's the idea that Vimes is obviously trying, and he's the one who's brought all these people to the watch, and he's the one who's expanded the watch. Colon's the kind who probably does grumble about it.
Also, how much is it Vimes saying it in private or amongst his...
I'm not sure that's necessarily better. But,
no, I'm not saying it's better, but,
I think it's the kind of thing where Vimes, although he doesn't think he should be a diplomat and doesn't like to be ambassador, is more diplomatic.
Yes.
Because he has to be.
And he's got a lot of respect.
Doesn't have a bit at all. Colin starts looking at sugar cubes and thinks people are stealing them, and they aren't. And he fires people left, right, and centre randomly.
He manages to depopulate the watch in the course of a couple of weeks, pretty much.
I feel like it's only like a week.
I mean, it's certainly a short time period.
And then he keeps having to report to veterinary, and part of him realises what he's doing is awful and is terrified, but that bit's frozen, so he's just going on this bullheaded kind of way.
I think the best bit is, though, crime actually goes down.
Yeah, I was going to get to that. So, because at one of the various points when Colin is terrified talking to veterinary, because like, one bad apple ruins the whole barrel, and the patrician goes, I think there's only a basket now, possibly a punnet. Also, the one bad apple thing, because I think that's I think in case of, police corruption, I think in other things, well, where it's like corruption or one bad apple, and it's like, and people never say the second bit. It's like, it's not one bad apple, so we'll just not do anything. No. So that's not the same. But yes, it's just that he fired a load of people for almost nothing.
A lot of them quit.
Well, no, I think when the firing started, people started quitting. Also, it's only made the point, they're a bit like, he's sort of telling people off for taking flavours, and like, he goes on patrol with a basket.
Yes.
Or a swag bag or something. There's also quite a good bit, and I can't quite remember how it came up. Veterinary is used to talking to Vimes and sort of like telling him things and getting through, and then he's having to keep switching tracks to get to where Colon is, and then it's perplexing, which he probably realised in Jingo in the submarine, but
yeah.
There's one bit where Colon says something about, not in favour of unnatural things, sir. And the veterinary looking perplexed. You mean you eat your meat raw and sleep in a tree? I remember that one quite a bit from reading as a kid, because whenever people say, oh, this is unnatural, you'd be like, so are most things. Like, take a look around you. It's all not natural, probably.
I don't know, that our avocado's quite natural.
We're in England and there's an avocado in the corner. It's not natural. Anyway. But yes, him passing over Nobby means that Nobby then becomes...
rightfully so. I think it's a matter of disgruntlement but also seeing that something has to be done. He forms the Guild of Watchmen. Union of Watchmen.
Yes, it's not... I think... Why did they say guild? I'd written union here, but it's effectively...
The paper... All the right paperwork's gone in, though, so...
Yes.
So, yes, he basically... And then calls them all out on strike.
Yes. While Colon's barricaded himself in the office, accusing everyone of stealing sugar cubes. And he keeps counting them, they keep being less each time. It's very clear he's just eating them and not noticing. And also that he's not good at counting.
Yes.
Or reading. He's not skilled at various things, which, it's a society where many people aren't particularly literate, no. But... I do like this one bit, which I don't necessarily agree with the thing, but it's just quite a good pun. It's like, there is a saying, it won't get better if you pick it. Because yes, Nobby's out there with the strike at the watch house, and then Veterinary's coach comes along and talks to him and goes away. But yes, Veterinary approves the watchman's strike because it's a crime-free day. And then his secretary, like even the Thieves Guild, who are legal, are lying low, and his patrician secretary Drumknot is confused. He goes, but surely when the cat's away, and Veterinary goes, mice can't anticipate, and the humans know that Vimes will be back. And even Nobby, who's done all that, partly because, his friend Fred pissed him off by this thing, if he got Nobby in, Nobby was almost a bit like he could have been the kind of in-between and smooth things over, but when Colon promoted the dwarf over him, Nobby was like, the troll over him. Nobby was like, no. And but even he's in his head terrified, going, Mr. Vimes is going to go spare. So yeah, that's just quite a funny sort of back in Angua Pork. Colon's gone insane, and only part of him realises it, and part of it's. Well, yes, because part of him is thinking, oh, this is easy. I could have been officer a while ago. I don't know why other people were. So he's doing all this bluster even to himself a bit, but part of him's like, no. Oh, no. in the end, they only get him out of the office by bringing Mrs. Fred in. Angua and Carrot, which, yes. I mean, we've discussed before how I like Angua.
Yes.
And had Werewolf versus Vampire been more of a cultural what's it when I was a teen rather than coming along later when I was in my 20s. I was like, werewolves seem more cool, and I think Angua is a big part of that. And basically, she's supposed to be going to the Uberwald delegation, because the point is that Vimes got Angua, Detritus and Cheery because they're all from Uberwald.
Yes.
Although Detritus came down to the city when he was, tiny, so...
Yeah, but Angua specifically is part of a aristocratic family from Uberwald.
Her parents are the Baron and Baroness von Uberwald. And since her first name's actually Seraphine... no, that's her mum's name.
Delphine.
Yes. She has a load of fancy names, like aristocrats do, and then just uses one of the middle ones. Much like various people who like to not seem as posh as they are.
Yes.
Anyway... That's another thing here. But but basically a wolf comes, who she knows, and then tells something and races off, and she sends a letter to Carrot saying, I'm going off, I've got a family thing, just leave it. And then Carrot immediately resigns his post and chases after, taking only Gaspode, who he knows can talk, and also can talk to Angua, and also can smell.
But he's an excellent tracker. He needs an excellent tracker.
Well, because he can't smell anything. He's human / dwarf. Neither good smelling.
No. I have to say, I think Carrot could have made more preparation for this. He does kind of run off in a very thoughtless, I'm just going to chase after her.
The thing is, he takes his time to send a letter of resignation to Vetinari, find Gaspode, and that's kind of Gaspode's needed.
And buy a horse,
and that's kind of it.
Yes. He doesn't buy food, equipment.
Warm clothes.
He's got to have known that he's going to be travelling to Uberwald, which is not exactly an easy route or warm, because they keep talking about it coming up to snowing, and
there is snow in it. It's quite wintry.
Yeah, he doesn't even pack a toothbrush. This kind of he does something, resigns with the patrician, does it all properly, and then doesn't think it just seems.
Oh yes, because he actually goes to the patrician. He sends a letter. No, he goes to him.
Goes to the patrician, resigns.
Because the patrician gives him a clue that he should check whichever gate it is. Yeah,
and he just does feel like he's being a little bit of an idiot.
It's kind of partly really organised, partly reckless. But if you think about in Jingo, where Angua was taken, and that's why they ended up getting the boat to Clatch, Vimes is sort of amazed that Carrot's there having a sleep. And he's like, how can you sleep when your girlfriend's been taken? And Carrot's like, well, me being, unrested won't help her when we catch up. So it's a bit odd. I think there's various things that I think are supposed to be quite romantic, and I don't feel it. The thing is, when I was a teenager I read this, I was like, it's fairly romantic. But now I'm a bit like, meh. I don't like their relationship quite as much now that I'm a grown adult. I'm like, okay. I mean, it's sort of nice. I suppose you've got this thing that... Because this is Angua leaving. I mean, she says she's going to go do all the family thing, but she is leaving. And there's been various times before, her initially hooking up with Carrot was supposed to be a one-time thing because she thought, I'm about to be chased out of town, might as well. And then they're obviously in a relationship, and then the fact that Carrot's very monogamous, that seems to be kind of maybe how dwarves are anyway.
Yeah.
Also, kind of seems how Carrot is. And that's fine. I can't personally fault anyone for that. But just the fact, he's very committed, fine, lovely. But it all seems to be Angua's a bit not sure. And there's been previous books where she's been a bit like, I should go. He doesn't like that people, make fun of the fact she's a werewolf. It makes him uncomfortable. He doesn't kind of like it. It's almost like he doesn't like the complexity of it or the nuance of it. Like, he's very simple and straightforward. But again, with Carrot, there's always this thing of like, is he simple and straightforward? Does it just seem that way? But there's stuff under the surface, which is brought up quite a bit in this book. Also, the fact that when Vimes is saying, well, who would kill Wallace Donkey? He's a national hero. The overpopulation crisis would be worse, if it weren't for him, which is fair.
Yeah.
Carrot's like, some people have views a bit stiffly. And I'm like, does Carrot have views? Are they not taking precautions?
That is a question. Yeah.
Well, I mean, we don't necessarily need to know, but I'm a bit like, I don't love that, if I'm honest.
No.
Because, I mean, the whole thing with, people getting a bit obsessed about, Carrot and Angua from the weird king for obsessive people. There might be puppets or something. This is the other thing. People always seem to be like, oh, well, their relationship, we must think about children. And I'm like, I don't know that's anyone's mind. It doesn't seem to be Angua's thing. I don't get the impression she's interested. And when we hear more about her family, I understand why. Carrot's a bit... maybe a bit personally prudish, and again, I cannot fault anyone for that. And because there's a bit where Vimes and Sybil have clearly kind of discussed, how will that be for them? What's their future? Yes. But again, it's like, okay, it's like, I mean, okay, you might talk about the relationships of people behind their backs, all right, but it's just everyone seems focused on what the children's situation will be with them being like interspecies. It's like, but Carrot's a human raised by dwarves. Yes. Like, he's already, used to adapting and being in that sort of in-betweeny sort of space. So why is it such a problem for that? It's more that Angua seems to think that he can't deal with things. And I guess maybe this is him showing that he can?
I don't know. The relationship kind of starts, in the previous books. It's like you can kind of perhaps, but the development of it.
I also do not like now. I think that the whole, and it was. Yeah, in the previous book, Angua was like, oh, like if he called, I'd come running, the whole dog comparison. But that seems a bit not great. Yeah. I don't think Carrot's like that, but the fact it's in the narrative feels a bit sort of odd. If we go on to Angua's family situation, which is probably a bit more interesting. So she's one of a litter. There's her, there's Wolfgang, who we will get to later, but he's a nightmare. And then they've got two siblings who are, I forget the word, but it's some sort of werewolf birth defect and they can't shift. So the whole thing is, they can all, this kind of werewolf can shift from full human to full wolf form. Yeah. And they have to shift at full moon, but the rest of the time it's entirely voluntary. But they have two siblings who can't shift. So one of them is always in human form. There was a sister that was always in human form, and then there was a brother who was always in wolf form. And basically, her brother Wolfgang killed the one who was always human. And so the one who was always wolf ran off before that could happen to him. Yeah. Quite unsurprising. And now works as a sheepdog. And
I think that's a brilliant little. It's like not only you run away, he's now getting gainfully employed as a sheepdog.
But and the thing is, Angua is sort of explaining this to Carrot this after he catches up with them, and he's like, "Oh, that's nice," and she's like, "What?" And I think this is the thing. Angua's always a bit upset that Carrot doesn't react more, but the point is, he did react a lot by even coming out. So it's a bit. This is the thing. They always seem to be Angua always seems to be kind of at odds with him, and kind of. She's annoyed at him because he's not being unreasonable, which she knows is unreasonable. I think that annoys her, it makes her feel more unreasonable. But again, it does sort of seem this thing that he's fully like, yes, I'm in this is the relationship, and she's a bit like, okay, but there's some stuff you do that quite annoys me, and also the fact she sort of feels like she needs to be with him. I don't know. Yeah. I mean, part of the thing is also Gavin.
Yes, Gavin the wolf, who's the old friend. Who comes to, does quite a brave thing for a wolf. Comes all the way to Angua.
He is a true wolf.
But he's a proper wolf. I think the idea
is... He's a very male wolf.
Yes. I think the idea is he's supposed to be this kind of lone wolf, because he doesn't seem to have a pack. He kind of subverts packs around him.
The implication I got is that Gavin probably has werewolf ancestry, because he's particularly intelligent for a wolf, but is still a wolf. And this also brings up the idea that wolves hate werewolves, which is what Angua says. And Carrot's like, well, surely, She's like, well, no, because humans hate werewolves, so why wouldn't wolves hate werewolls? It's like neither group likes this thing that's sort of sometimes one and sometimes the other, and not quite either.
And also the as the wolves pointed out, if people are pissed off at werewolves, they just go and kill wolves. They don't see that they you know, how do you tell, you know, other than the fact that perhaps when you shoot it with a silver thing it doesn't turn into a huge... The point is, you go kill wolves. Wolves are the easy things to, you know, you don't just go around murdering people in case they're werewolves, because that's just not, you know, but the wolves cop it.
Yeah.
So this is the reason why Gavin is coming to Ankh-Morpork to get Angua, because he sees the problems, he sees what the von Uberwald family is... Not so much all of it is up to, but he sees the problems.
What Wolfgang's doing is that she knows Wolfgang is doing something with the dwarves. There's meetings in the forest, and the werewolves are getting worse, and that's making everyone tetchy. And then obviously, the wolves get. I wasn't quite sure if Gavin didn't have his own pack, or if he'd left his own pack to kind of go do the travelling or go back to them, because presumably he must have some stake in the local area.
But he seems to kind of, he obviously subverts every pack they run across.
I mean, he immediately turns up. Fights the alpha, becomes pack leader for a bit, and then leaves when they get out of their sort of range.
Yeah.
And I mean, there are a lot of parallels drawn between Carrot and Gavin.
Yes.
So clearly, wolf or human, Angua has a type.
Yeah, which is why again I could see very much more of a case of he just subverts the local populace to be, so he's in charge. Yeah. And then he moves on.
Kind of this is the leader kind of guy.
Yeah.
But yes, and everyone, because Gaspo's there, and obviously Gaspo's offering much comment, and also Gaspo's translating between what Carrot says and what wolves and say, because they find another wolf who's going to be killed, and then they sort of rescue it a bit, and Carrot wants to be really kind to it, and Gaspo's there like, this is not how this works. He's like, the human's going to offer you some steaks, don't eat them, they're poisoned. He runs off, and then Gaspo's a bit like, oh no, chickens, yes, and it's a bit like, oh, more chickens for me. Yeah. But yes, it's this whole idea that Gaspo really tries to emphasise just how male Gavin is.
Yes.
Very much that Gavin's name is... because wolves don't have names. Like, Carrot's like, what's he called? And Gaspo's like, that's not really how dogs and wolves work, particularly wolves don't have names. But yes, Gavin would be acceptable, for he has eaten a person called Gavin.
Yeah. I mean, there's this throughout. There's kind of this idea that, perhaps Gavin and Angua are,
Well, it keeps saying old friend.
Yeah.
But then Gaspo sort of suggests he should be jealous. Even Angua sort of seems to suggest he should be something like that. And Carrot just is very straightforward. No, he seems like a fine wolf. And it's like, stop being so reasonable.
Yeah, which I think is winding Angua up just as much as everything else. So
that's the thing, she seems more wound up than she should be. But as we see more about her family, it's unsurprising she's wound up.
We kind of move on because so the von Uberwalds, you've got the Baron, who is obviously stays in wolf form way too much. So
when he has been in human form, he doesn't remember clothes. That's the other thing, they don't really wear clothes because they're shifting. He doesn't remember clothes. I think he's wearing a bathrobe or something.
He wears a bathrobe. It's Wolfgang that kind of avoids the clothes.
Wolfgang's naked a lot of the time.
Yeah, but he it's short sentences,
Yes, and the Baron sort of like kind of barks his words, and also he has a knife and fork. He's looking at them like he doesn't remember what they are, and then also because Vimes has to visit the various dignitaries, and also Vimes often tries to mention Angua, and Angua's mother, who's clearly a bit more brainy, but not smart enough to restrain her son.
No.
Just brush over it, will not mention it once. To the point where he's like, I'll tell Angua you asked after, and he just gets blanked. So that's clearly a whole thing.
Yes.
But there's a bit that they've got this castle wall, and we've already established in Uberwald, hunting trophies are the thing.
Yes.
There's a lot in the embassy, which they insisted to be removed. But it's like, there's hunting trophies, and Vimes like, no weapons anywhere. Not a single weapon is there in this castle. And at one point, the Baroness says something about being hunting. I was like, oh, yes, I suppose it must be a lot of effort dealing with the horses. And she's like, horses? Oh, yes. And it's like, they're not using horses, and they're not using weapons.
So the Baroness went to school with Lady Sybil, and Lady Sybil has been sending letters to the Baroness.
Because she just sends letters to all the people who went to school.
That is what you do.
You have your Hogswatch card list, and you send everyone a card and a letter about what's been happening in your family that whole time. And I mean, that's very familiar from certainly my own family. Well, my mother. I think we'll get on to Sybil.
Soon. So she's the more, I'm going to say,
sensible,
just
civilized
about,
one.
but only, not sensible enough.
She can put on civility.
Yeah.
But she's clearly letting her son and I think is involved in some of the scheming stuff and the unpleasant stuff they're doing, which we'll get to. But the thing is that Angua feels like she has to go and deal with her brother because she knows he has to be stopped. And she says, obviously a nightmare person, but it's that she's the only person that can fight him. Like, she says her father's half gone, her mother's just going along with it, which isn't very smart. And in fact, later, Sybil realises she doesn't like her. Yes. And in fact, anything... And so they keep saying all these awful things about, like, dwarves and trolls. And assuming that Sybil will agree, because she's also a lady, like with a capital L. And Sybil's like... and then starts thinking, if there was an argument with her on one side, then Sybil would probably want to be on the other, Yeah. So, so it's the sort of, like, again, this privilege and nobility thing. And I think Lady Seraphine von Uberwald thinks she's quite a player. But, I mean... the werewolf stuff isn't very... Again, she's just let her son run amok and... To be honest,
the werewolf plot is quite unnuanced. With there are other players on the board.
We'll get to that. I think it's not surprising that Angua decided to leave this behind and get well.
But Wolfgang is horrendous.
We'll get... I think shall we do Lady Sybil next?
Yes.
I think we do Sybil and Vimes, then we'll circle back to the werewolf whole plot thing. Lady Sybil's back. Yeah. Because in Men-at-Arms, they're getting married, and so she sort of mentioned there's stuff where he's like mean to some rich people, and she's like, that's beneath you, and he's still kind of drinking. And then in Jingo, she's mostly just there to think about, the men going off to war.
Yeah.
And Feet of Clay, she's sort of barely in. And I was just like, where's Sybil? She's here, this is where she is. Vimes is going as the Duke of Ank, which he hates, but that is why he's being sent. So which makes her the Duchess of Ank.
Yes.
So there's various bits where they're travelling, and there's like a pass where it's sort of dangerous and there are bandits, but Sybil insists on going into danger with Sam. And then also there's a clerk/assassin who's with them, who's helping out, who's kind of briefing Vimes, tend to be a clerk, and then later Vimes finds out and goes, no, he's an assassin. But his whole job is actually to protect Vimes, because Vimes first thought, what's the price on me? And he's like, oh no, we've taken you off the thing. Also, by the way, where are all these assassins?
Where these guys?
But I put him on a boat. He's halfway to the rim by now. But so there's a bit of stuff about Vimes there. But yes, she's like, no, I'll go on. And she seems very doubting, very like, I'm going to be with my husband. I'm going to, go into this. But then later, when they get through this pass and they've had this standoff with the bandits, all stuff happening, they go to the local inn. And it's only at that point, having run on adrenaline and like going through this dangerous bit of snow and having dealt with these bandits and stuff, they get to the inn and everyone sort of looks aghast at them, and somebody gives Vimes a bad look and he looks inside and realises that Sybil's crying. She was actually very upset with this because she doesn't do... she doesn't do danger. I mean, she breeds swamp dragons, but that's the type of danger she knows.
Yeah, that's a very different type of danger.
Yes.
And you can't... Yeah.
And he sort of apologises. Oh, I'm sorry. But he's not very good at comforting.
No.
He's very awkward. He's very... it says at one point something about him being the kind of man who incapable of kissing his wife in public, which... I guess as a person of a certain age, around when this is being written, and he sort of feels awful, but he's not good at it. And then she apologises to him, and he realises that she thinks she's let him down, and he's like, the opposite is true, but he doesn't have the kind of emotional intelligence or comfort level to tell her that, even in private, I think. So there's this thing that he's like, oh, actually, he's off and things are getting dangerous, but like his wife is here, so that's like a different stake to it. And then there's stuff later in the embassy. So she's in the embassy and she's redecorating it, and they take down all the heads, and she's measuring for carpet, and she's dealing with Igor, who's obviously the main servant there. And but there's bits when there's sort of explanations about, because the previous he wasn't ambassador but the consul, because it was consulate, wasn't it, sort of disappeared, and then Sybil finds the secret room with the secret exit and all these notebooks. And Vimes like, wait, what? He was a spy? And Sybil's like much more clear-headed. She's like, well, yes. And Vimes like, but that's not right. And she's like, you spy all the time. So I do not. And she's like, what about? And then she names all these people who are clearly like basically snitches in Ankh-Morpork.
Informants, thank you very much.
Yes. And he's like, that's information received. And Sybil, who... is in the aristocracy, and yes, hasn't been involved in international stuff particularly, but, is a bit like, well, Havelock just walks a bigger street. It's also the fact that she always calls Vassanari Havelock, because she's known him for however long. Vimes does find it kind of useful for Sybil to be there, because when they go to the sort of celebration before the coronation, or it's all very diplomatic, and, he's got Cheery and Detritus are attaches.
Yes.
And at one point, Vimes introduces her as Duchess of Ankh. And it's clear, Vimes Lothar was Duchess, so if he was using it, he wanted to out-Dutch everyone. So Sybil immediately goes into Duchess mode, and then if Vimes wants to move away, she's like, hello, how are you? And she gets very aristocratic and very friendly and very complimentary and also quite overbearing. And yes, but it means that Vimes can be kind of pushed through because she can do this. She is raised to this sort of thing.
Weaponised aristocracy.
Also, the only other Duchess we've had in the series so far was Susan, who does no Duchessing whatsoever.
She's definitely not a Duchess.
Does anyone in Stokehealer even know what she looks like?
I imagine she turns invisible most of the time when she has to...
Is she ever there? We don't know. We know nothing about Stokehealer. She's just Duchess of it. But that said, though, I mean, it's quite common for people to be Duke of wherever and they never go there. Yeah. Like, that's not really how those titles work. Except it does seem like it is a bit more on the Stowe Plains because, like, you're then actually ruling that city. So who knows what's happening? Clearly, we're not supposed to care.
Yeah.
But here, you know, Sybil, proper Duchessing, you know, that's all there. And we already discussed how Sybil knows, you know, this famous dwarf opera, one of the most famous songs, sort of duets from the dwarf opera, because she played one of the leads at school. So, I mean, this thing, she's loving the cultural stuff because she knows about this sort of thing and she was trained in it. You know, and the fact that she's fine that, there's a dwarf love story and it doesn't have gender because everyone's a dwarf.
Yeah.
And then later she's like a really good ally to Cheery.
Yeah.
Helping her. Because there's a bit when they go to this inn on the journey where, you know, Vimes like, oh, well, Cheery can go be the lady's mate. And then all the people in the inn object because they're like, well, dwarves are he. So, and Vimes is like, no. It's like, you can't say, like, Vimes like, no, we're going to insist on this and help out. And it's like, you know, Corporal, just like close your eyes at the appropriate moments. I don't know. But yes, but there's this whole thing where you sort of get bits where Sybil's sort of thinking about the fact that she hears stuff. Like, she knows Vimes wouldn't kill, and how much Vimes will kill is in this very much. She hears about later, like, fights. You know, she hears from the people doing the laundry that sometimes there are bloodstains on the clothes and stuff. And she, there was a rooftop chase, there was a brawl, there was a scuffle. And she sort of knows in her heart of hearts he's a really good man, but she knows he also has a dangerous and difficult job that puts him in contact with a lot of very unpleasant people who have, like, alarming nicknames. There's this sort of idea that she's like the domestic, you know, it's the kind of her indoors kind of thing.
I also like the fact that she turns out to be a more quote secret weapon when it comes to trade talks.
Yeah, so well, I mean, obviously her knowledge of the dwarf opera saves the day when dwarves come and means that they can actually take the skin into the mind. But then they end up meeting the Low King, and it's Vimes and Sybil, and Vimes at this point is very confused. But what happens is, because Sybil was in the embassy when they're waiting for stuff. Oh well, then I said the werewolves take her. So this is before they get to the mine. The werewolves invite her. That's when she sort of realises, oh, actually these people are awful and the food was terrible, like they don't know how to cook. And it's like, I don't think they cook very much.
No.
She's there a bit like, let me find the quote because it was amazing. Among the other unwanted baggage handed on the young Sybil to hamper her progress through life was the injunction to be pleasant to people and say helpful things. People took this to mean that she didn't think. And again, there's the thing, you know, the Baroness will call dwarves subhuman, and Sybil doesn't like that. But I don't think she quite at this point knows how to call that out. She doesn't like the fact that, you know, she thinks she'll agree with her stupid opinions just because they're both aristocrats. But then she realises she wants to get out, so she escapes boarding school style, which is like tying all the bedclothes together and going out the window. But as she's doing that, she hears the sort of banging from the other end of the car. So she's like, oh, Sam is here. People are worked up and angry. Sam must have arrived. So she sort of is in the process of saving herself when he turns up to save her, which is fine. But yes, when towards the end they go to the dwarf mine.
Yeah, because obviously they had sent a clerk to do the diplomacy stuff. But unfortunately, he was got by werewolves. Some point
diplomacy and spying.
At some point earlier in the book. So at the point where actually it comes down to the meat and fat of it, to actually get the trade sorted. Well, Vimes is kind of looking startled, like
he hasn't slept for a long time. He's very tired.
True. He had been chased by wolves quite a lot then.
We'll get to that.
But yes, so Sybil basically having done her research because she was bored.
Vimes and Sybil are showing what is basically one of Dwarfdom's greatest secrets.
Yes.
And having know this, and the king's like, oh, so maybe we'll give you this and this. Like, it was like, wait a minute. And she immediately goes, we want this many pence per barrel on this. After 6 months, we want this much on this. I don't think this seam is going as well as you guys think. I think... And then both Vimes and Low King are like, huh? And basically, because Vimes just be like, yes. It's like, what... you know, it's like, what do you want? And Vimes like, fat? Frank more pork? And then Sybil's in there with, you know, we need this grade at this and this grade at this, after 6 months this, well, you know. And she does this negotiating for this, and the king's like, no, wait a second. It has this whole negotiation, and Vimes just there like, what's happening? But it's amazing. And in fact, later, the king's a bit like, can you send somebody else to negotiate before your lady, like, bankrupts us? Or something.
Yeah, I think it's because later on he announces that they're mining silver again, but, you know, basically...
Send another negotiator.
Yeah, send another. Please send someone else.
It's the fact that Sybil was there. And this thing, you know, so Sybil's so pleasant, and she's quite posh and nice, and people are, she's probably a bit silly. But, you know, she knows this thing.
And she most likely read the briefing packet.
Well, no, this thing, she was there and she just read the notebooks and she figured it out. And I mean, the thing is, she has also been managing a household for a very long time.
Yes.
Because it's unclear when her parents died, and she clearly doesn't have siblings, but, like, it's clearly just been her rattling around that place with servants for quite some time before she met Vimes.
And the Sunnyside Home for Dragons.
Yes,
to keep that running on a shoestring.
It's not a shoestring, because she is... I mean, it says the thing about hampering her progress through life. She is the richest woman in Angua.
Yes.
And so, yeah, she's been hampered in, like, some psychological ways, but she also has a lot of a generational wealth. So we shouldn't feel too bad for her in that respect.
Okay. You still need to budget for dragons.
Again, I mean, she literally gives the Watcher a building. But the other thing with Sybil, which is she keeps in Angua on the journey, and then later at least once or twice in the book, keeps trying to tell Vimes something.
Trying to have a conversation.
She's like, I saw Mrs. Content, and then something interrupts them. There's also the fact that Vimes has... I'm not the best pleased with Vimes' husbanding thing, because it's that sort of thing where heterosexual marriage is sort of shown as, like, two people trying to get around each other, and I was like, that's not really selling this whole thing that we're supposed to have based our whole society on. And I mean, like, you know, like, we're happy with it, works for us, but, like, it's like, I don't feel like people of the future looking at this and be like, well, this seems like an institution that needs no help, or it couldn't be improved. But yes, there's a bit where Vimes has that whole husbanding thing where he's, like, trying to, like, listen without really listening, so he can just figure out how to respond at the right moment without paying attention.
I mean, does this feel like a little bit like a ChatGTP giving the answer?
Oh, I hadn't thought of that. No, I was just
giving the answer that is expected.
Well, I mean,
without actually thinking of what the...
Well, I mean, I was just not, because it's sort of this idea that it's a husband's skill to be able to listen to your wife going on and be able to not just nod or go in the right places, but actually say something that sounded pertinent. But the fact that Sybil can see he's doing it, and then she's like, and then I thought we'd bring the crocodile. And he's like...
Yes, I think the bananas will work.
Yeah. What she eventually tries to tell him is that she's pregnant.
Yes.
And he's, like, really surprised. He thought maybe they were getting on a bit for that. And she's like... Well, no, my family's been bred for breeding, so it's fine. So that's kind of nice. And then at the end, when at first Vimes was thinking, he could get back to Ankh-Morpork, all he wants, because whenever Vimes is outside of Ankh-Morpork, he just wants to be back in Ankh-Morpork, where he knows how things are. And there's been this whole thing about him being outside the law and away from the law. But then suddenly he's like, you know what, we're actually going to go on a little holiday.
Yes.
Which is nice.
Yeah, it's nice. He finally realises, no, we've had a bit of a rough time. We're gonna take the very scenic route back. Much like in Witches Abroad, where they went to see the elephants.
Yeah. Speaking of, I think we get on to Vimes now. I feel like this is the first book where we're definitely getting into the Vimes show thing, which is more in the rest of the series. But I think this is where it's not necessarily started. Like, there's always a lot from Vimes' point of view, but I feel like this is where we get very in on Vimes more so than perhaps... Like, because it felt like Carrot had fairly equal kind of billing for a while.
Yeah.
But now it feels like Carrot's less than this. I mean, he's in it a fair bit. It doesn't feel as
you don't get as many. Well, you get the other characters. It's usually from Vimes' point of view.
Yeah. I mean, we get some stuff from Sybil's, obviously, but we get a bit from various people. But yeah, I mean, Carrot is still a viewpoint character. Angua less so, though. Yes, this whole idea that Vimes isn't a killer, but he's dealt with them and understands when someone's going to be efficient about killing, like the assassin Skimmer would be, and when they're just putting on a show or enjoying it. So when they meet these bandits at the pass, Vimes sort of sneaks away, and then he, like, lights his his cigar, and then sort of shoots them. And he only gets, well, I think it's actually Skim that kills one guy, but he manages to shoot one guy enough to disarm him, and then they get away.
The point is he manages to... He shoots one of them, and I feel like he does kill one, but he doesn't...
He didn't mean to, and then the rest are killed by the assassin.
Yes.
And then later the assassin's like, we don't grandstand, and Vimes like, what do you mean? He's like, the thing with the cigar, and he says, what, you mean the bit where they were all looking at a light in the dark?
Yeah.
Because Vimes had closed his eyes so he could retain his night vision. He lights the cigar, they're all looking at the light, and then he still has his night vision. So it's this thing that Vimes has been in a thing, as Sybil kind of vaguely hears about, where he has had to do some not great stuff, but it's always been self-defense. And you're right, he shot that one, didn't mean to kill them. And there's a bit where it goes, he'd never killed anyone with his bare hands before. Truth to tell, he never deliberately killed at all. There had been deaths. And that bit doesn't mention the villainous past, because then he kind of gets a bit of a reputation as being like the butcher of
30 bandits and a dog.
Yes, when actually it was 7 people and he only killed one of them. Yes, it's this idea of like what will he do, how far he go, but and he said there's times when if you're in a like hand-to-hand fight and it's you or the other guy, you just have to hope. Yeah. If you're rolling down a roof.
Yeah, I think the thing is he's been around lots of accidents. Rooftop chases, accidents happen.
I think it says at one point something about like if you roll down a roof, you have to take the other guys underneath you when you fall, like that. There's all these things he's done where people have died, and he has probably been the cause of their deaths, but only because they pushed it.
Yeah.
And then this comes up with the werewolf stuff in the book, and it's also Vimes sort of realising what his role is as ambassador, because he thinks I'm just there to like be a bit fancy, which he hates, and be the Duke of Angua, which he hates, and talk to a lot of like posh people, one of whom's a vampire, which he hates. But it's quite, in some ways it's quite good, and I think this is maybe what we were talking about before with Vimes having respect, is that Vimes refuses for Cheery and detritus to be treated differently. Yes. He refuses for Cheery to be treated like a man just because she's a dwarf, and he refuses for detritus to be treated like property, because this is the thing, dwarves not allowed in the town unless they have a certificate from their owner.
Trolls.
Oh, trolls. Oh, trolls, yes.
Yes.
I'm going to keep doing that, which is annoying. Sorry. But yes, and in fact, when they say that they won't let Cheery in because to the dwarves there, she's an abomination, and they use what's clearly a slur, which even detritus knows is a slur, at her, and because she's wearing quite a sensible skirt, but it is like a little skirt.
You can see her ankles.
And then they're also saying, well, trolls are only allowed in the town if Noda, and he's like, he's a free citizen of Ankh-Morpork, these are both free citizens of Ankh-Morpork, and he's like, and then Vimes is willing to turn around and just leave. He's like, fine, I'll go, and then Ankh-Morpork will not be at this coronation. Yeah. And all the powers that be are kind of looking around and being like, oh, okay, and sort of like he gets invited back, oh, we're sorry. And he also looks at the local watch, who are really just guards in the pay of whichever noble, gives them all. They get orders from different nobles, they just do what they're told. Which I think Vimes sort of thinks, that's kind of what we used to do.
Which I think is the least complicated and the safest way of going about things for them, to be honest.
Well, because you've got the dwarves, the werewolves, and the vampire Lady Margalotta, who we may get to. But yes, it's all this the stuff, and then Vimes is like, oh, I haven't been sent to a coronation, I've been sent to a war that hasn't started yet, because there's obviously all the stuff going on, and there's a bit where Vimes is talking to the Baron, and well, mostly the Baroness, and he's like, oh, this is diplomacy, it's like lying, only to a better class of people. It's also making mindless chatter while watching people, like being a copper, because that's the thing, he's watching people, and he can see who's being shifty and stuff, and it's like, and again, it's like that thing that Sybil said about, well, it's just a bigger beat.
Yeah.
It's international rather than on the street. Basically what happens is when Vimes is being chased by werewolves, which again we'll get to the game, there's a few he does do stuff which would kill them, but werewolves are undead, which again
but we're going, they're
not the best term, but yes.
They're more durable than your own.
Yeah, the point is only fire and silver kills them. They don't have silver there. There's a few things where he like somebody, because he falls down a waterfall and he's in a boat and they're chasing him, and he holds somebody under the water, and then he whacks someone in the door. So there's this stuff, and they probably
they're gonna have a headache.
It'll take them a while, but they will come back. And he's after killing Werewolf Hall cover. He had this bit where he wanted to beat his chest and scream, and in a voice strategized how best to describe, but a deeper, raw, red voice says to kill them all. So he knows there's this thing. He knows it's in him, but he's always keeping an eye on it. Yeah. And again, this is a thing we'll get more and more with Vimes, particularly as it becomes more and more about Vimes.
Yes.
But it's not dissimilar to some of the Granny Weatherwax before. And in fact, where the Granny Weatherwax were previously in Carpe Jugulum was very much, I think, the culmination of a lot of that. Vimes is kind of, I think, on the start of some of this sort of thing, which will become, I guess, more involved in dwarf stuff, but also more mythic later on in the series. But yes, there's also the fact that Vimes sort of identifies how Wolfgang is, which Angua knew and sort of tried to explain his character. She's not there yet, but he won't back down. He'll do what he's going to do. It's that Vimes has to go deal with him. Actually, shall we do the werewolf stuff, and then we can kind of tie that into what the eventual fate of Wolfgang. In Carpe Jugulum, obviously vampires.
Very vampire.
Very vampire, who were very fascist.
Very fascist.
And there was a lot of talk about, what they drink is power over people, and stuff about you have to kill your own vampires. They were new and modern, and coming up with like they can't come up with all this new stuff. The werewolf stuff is also quite fascist.
Yes,
it was very fascist.
It's
just a slightly different like flavour.
Yes, we get vanilla and the strawberry fascism in this one. I'm just pulling flavours out of the air.
Yeah, okay. I did read a comment somebody made, I think on BlueSky a while ago, which said, it's quite cool that Pratchett wrote a book where it's the werewolves, the fascists, not the vampires. And I'm like, well, no, but he did a vampire fascist book. He just then did the werewolf fascist book. So yeah, the idea of the werewolves is the werewolves have gotten really strong, they've gotten very bold. And there was always kind of this uneasy agreement, I think, between different factions. So Wolfgang, I think he looks a lot like Angua, but like male. And in fact, at one point, Vimes sort of thinks, Angua has this sort of coiled tight tension to her, which is that she might flee at any moment, but Wolfgang says he might fight at any moment. He's also what apparently Noddy would call a sodden nutter. Yes. And he's the kind of guy that will not back down, he'll just keep going. But he's very, I guess, Volkish in that, Wolfgang's got this whole purity of blood and harking back to our traditions, but in like a horrible, violent way where he's in charge of things.
I mean, he's also blonde and potentially blue-eyed in the...
Yes, but I think they're all littermates, so we'll spit like Angua. Yeah, so the book is very much like he's blonde. And he's also physically quite perfect. The 1930s poster just brings itself to your mind, doesn't it? Yeah. And there's a bit where they've got a new flag, the werewolves. It's like, the werewolves have a new flag. It's a red background with a black wolf head with stylized lightning in the mouth. And when I first read that, I was like, they're not mentioning a white circle, but one presents itself to mind very strongly. But then later it came to me, it's like, are the stylized lightning shapes in the wolf's mouth look a little bit like S's by any chance?
Yeah.
So yes, so that's very Nazi. Yeah, and then it's, like, the Baroness is welcoming, but being diplomatic and kind of strategically lying. The Baron's not with it at all, but then... And Wolfgang's there, but as a wolf. And you have bits where you sort of see the family and... they're talking about stuff, and they underestimate Vimes. They think, he's just a silly guy. Whereas the dwarves and the vampire, I think, know better.
Well, they're also basing it off Sybil's letters.
Because, of course, so their inside information is Sybil, who's writing it as, like, a proud wife.
Yes.
Which is a little different. But when he meets Wolfgang, one of the few times Wolfgang is wearing clothes is at the dwarf soiree. And yes, that's Vimes kind of described as like, you get, like, it's like, he's seen these guys types on the street, like tiny little guys who'll try and take on detritus, and just no moderation, no sense. So this just pure fightiness. And this is what Angua doesn't like, because Angua feels like she's the one that could take him on. And she said when they were kids, she was one of the few that could kind of beat him in a fight. But he's obviously been honing... Although at some point, like even the Baroness says, well, he's honed every muscle in his body to perfection except his brain.
Yeah.
But he's clearly colluding with the dwarves, trying to basically destabilise the dwarf situation with the whole stealing the scone so that the Low King can't be throned. So the Low King can't, take position, and then that would destabilise dwarfdom. But he talks about there's the game or the chase, which is basically this traditional thing where the werewolves get somebody in the woods and they'll give them like a certain head start and say, well, if you can get to the town's called Bonk, if you can get to Bonk, I think by dawn or something, or by a certain point, then they get some money from the Baron, and if they couldn't, well, like the werewolves create them.
Yeah.
So it's this chase thing, and it's Wolfgang even says, many a successful man in Bonk owes his start in life to our little custom. And I was like, this is kind of like escrow.
Yes.
It's not new, it's been going on for a long time. But the idea is that some people are in a position where, and I mean, is it being done as a form of justice, or is it like, have your try? It's not sort of theme parky like the old Count was.
No.
And it's not a new invention or anything particularly cunning or pretending to be nicer than it is, particularly like the escrow stuff in the new Count was. But it's clearly this, we have power over you and we'll do what we want to, but maybe occasionally we'll throw you a bone.
Part of me wonders whether, perhaps initially it was before Wolfgang got a hold of it. You could petition and say, I would, I'd like to take part, and you'd run your risk.
There's things that Angua says her father has done it, and she knew that, and she, I think, may have been involved as a kid, but then I think realised she was opposed to it.
Yeah, but the idea, whereas Wolfgang, he's obviously pulling people off. He's capturing people. One of the early bits in the book is someone doing this chase, which I think
it's the consul. The missing consul.
Yeah, it's the missing. Doesn't explicitly say it at that point, but you kind of
you can put it together.
Yeah. So but obviously it's done. They're doing it they're doing it for their fun. Wolfgang's doing it for his fun, the thrill of the chase, the thrill of the hunt.
Yeah, I mean, it says chasing is fun, but the toying behaviour to me feels more cat than dog. But I think what it actually is human.
Yes.
Because this is the thing, they have this slogan, I can't remember what it is now exactly, it's something about like when a man is like a wolf. And Angua was like, that's ridiculous. Wolves aren't like that. They're just being what humans think wolves are. But it's actually not about wolves. It's just another description for the scarier humans.
Yeah.
So you've got that whole thing. So it is very fascist, but in a more kind of straightforward not straightforward. I mean, it's all horrible, but it's they're saying these are our traditions, but they're making them more violent and more unpleasant.
Yeah.
Well, actually, like, that's the tradition, and also the assumed thing that we are obviously
superior.
We are the superior. Yes. Yes, I also feel a little bit like, because, so Vimes is trying to run, and I mean, it shows the scenes of somebody running through the snow away from them, and then later on it's werewolves, and the idea is that, they're actually quite clever, like, you might, try and use water, or climbing a tree, or hiding something to get there, but, like, if you're running from dogs or wolves, but these are also people, and they can figure things out, so, Vimes has to resort to being quite violent at various points, and also he sees Death for a little bit, because Death seems to be doing this new thing, where he turns up to make things uncertain, and I'm like... I mean, Death hasn't been in this so far, but okay, I sort of see what you're doing there. It's just a brief thing. Yes. And it's odd, because obviously Vimes can't normally see that sort of thing. I think the idea is he's hiding because he thinks he's going to die, and then he can kind of see...
I mean, he's been awake for a long time and running on adrenaline.
He'd already had to escape from Dwarf Mine because he got...
And is in his underwear.
Yes. Well, until he finds the Odd Sisters and gets given the gloomy trousers of Uncle Vanya.
Yeah.
And, I mean, Wolfgang's always sort of going on, but he starts calling him Mr. Civilized, trying to taunt him, but it's never like that smart as taunting. It's just him trying to have his fun, which he's only having because he's in a superior position. There's also the fact that Wolfgang's kind of literally Angua's evil twin, I think.
Yes.
Sort of, the whole flight thing. But one thing Vimes does notice is the werewolves don't like words like bath. Or vet, so they keep calling him the patrician, not veterinary, which is just a slightly funny sort of thing, but it's whatever edge he can use. And then Carrot and Angua and the Pax of True Wolf come in and sort of save Vimes, and Vimes is like, oh no, the Baroness has Sybil, and they have this confrontation with Wolfgang, and Vimes makes angry. He points out that, if Uberwald's so great, why is Ankh-Morpork full of people who have left to come here? Well, no, to come to us. And
why is everyone leaving? If this place is so great, why is everyone going to Morpork?
Yeah, it's because he's trying to pretend they're superior. The civilization is just a lie and stuff. And again, it was the werewolves that took down the clacks, and they also get the assassin. So yes, the point is that Wolfgang seems to be killed. He's thrown off. There's a confrontation where Carrot, Captain Tantony of the local watch, who Vimes was basically like, I'm very disappointed in you, because Vimes is now the byword for like good policing.
Yes.
And Tantony just does what he's told, and then Tantony actually tries to stand up to him, but tries to go about it. The problem is both Carrot and Tantony tries to properly arrest him, and Vimes like, actually, this isn't the time to do that. Sometimes you just have to bring him down. Carrot suddenly starts doing the very traditional boxing.
There's a
footnote.
Yeah, footnotes about basically the equivalent of Marquis of Queensberry's.
Yeah, it's the Marquis of Fantaylor or something.
Yeah, the idea.
You have to approach people properly, and it's like many people have died with the cursing of the man's name.
Yes, because that's what I was, if most people are just gonna.
They try to bring rules to a street fight.
Yeah, and it's not gonna work.
So basically, Wolfgang rips them to shreds a bit, but luckily there's an eagle around, and we'll get to that. Yeah. And then he gets thrown off the bridge, and everyone's like, he's gone, and Vimes like, but... And then he gets washed downstream, which, Vimes already had a little bit of. And Vimes, he can't come back. And it's like, but only fire and silver killed them. And we had that before, because obviously in Men-at-Arms, they thought Angua was dead, but then she came back. So we sort of, that's been established as the thing. It's sort of this idea that, things are kind of sorted, everything's fine, and then it's like, but you can't come back, can you? Then he's edgy and he's nervous, and just after Sybil said she's pregnant, isn't it? And he hears something break, and Sybil's like, it's probably just somebody dropped a glass or something. Then there's a scream that's cut off. It's like, no. Wolfgang turns up and kills the Igor at the embassy, and then races off. But what people kept saying to Vimes, because when he first arrives at the embassy, Igor goes, welcome to Ankh-Morpork.
Yes.
And then later Vimes thinks, somebody said something about Ankh-Morpork, what was it? And it's the fact that the embassy, because it's an embassy, the site of the embassy is Ankh-Morpork soil, because that's how embassies work, which Vimes sort of hadn't fully thought through. He was like, wait. And he's like, no, he's killed someone on Ankh-Morpork soil.
This is
now I've got it. And now he's in hot pursuit, where you're allowed to just go after and chase, as long as you keep going. And it's sort of foreshadowed that Vimes has some flares from the Clax Tower, which didn't get let off because Werewolf got them, but he takes them. And it's even said earlier, these make terrible weapons, because you can't aim them, they're just dodgy fireworks. But Vimes does a bit of stuff, and he goes and chases him, and Wolfgang's really damaged people in the square, and he turns up, and basically he says all the arrest words, and Wolfgang's just toying with him and just laughing at him. It's like, haha, like, this doesn't apply to me, I'm above all this, nonsense. And then Vimes lets off the flare, which doesn't really go to Wolfgang, but there's a certain, if you're between a human and a wolf, or your dog, and Wolfgang jumps and grabs the flare just as it explodes. And that and then Vimes is there realising that he has just done a murder. Like, he's killed someone he meant to. But then Tantony, who saw the whole thing, says, I saw you give him a warning. I saw you try to arrest him and him resist. Well, because he knocks him around, like, slightly.
Yeah.
I will say, actually, before this, there was a fight in the embassy, wasn't there? Because Angua tries going after him. And in fact, there's a bit where... because Angua knows that Wolfgang will come back, and he'll try and kill Carrot, because he already wounded him, because Carrot is hers. Yeah. That's the thing. You kind of think, there's a couple of times where, Angua refers to Carrot as mine in a very kind of, very possessive sort of, particularly when she's kind of in wolf form, changing from wolf form. And they have this big fight that's kind of like them tumbling and fighting, sort of shifting between human and wolf, till they're both kind of like slightly a bit furry and with like wolf ears. And in the end, Angua ends up bleeding on the floor, and Vimes has to kind of like scoop her up and help, and he's like, but she's naked. He's like, I'm trying not to look anywhere. And then Sybil comes out and immediately goes, oh no, the poor thing. And I remember that, or like, there's no way she's like, well, this isn't inappropriate because she's just had to fight her evil twin brother. And the point is, Angua came here, I think, meaning to stop him. Yeah. But it's like, she can't do it. So she's not ruthless enough to. She's not. Well, no, that's why she left, because she's not like a monster. Yeah. So Vimes realises he has to deal with it, and Vimes feels really bad. And there's even a bit where he says he could have said something. He could have said fetch or something. Like quite often you watch a film and there'll be like somebody kills someone, they have like a line like James Bond. That kind of one line. And he even thinks of it and is like, no, that's awful. But he knows that he's thought of it. Yeah. But then Tantony says, you said you were going to arrest him. You gave him a warning that you were armed. You were not to know, being not from here, the dog-like nature of werewolves means that he would have tried to catch the firework in his mouth. Of course, Vimes did know that. Yeah. But if anyone writes it down, why would he have known that? Yes. He was just flying a flare as a warning. Yes. So it's this interesting thing that Vimes knows himself that he did kind of kill someone, but he knew that if he didn't, he would be back. Yeah. At any point, he would come back. So he has kind of put him down, and he obviously has that feeling, but, somebody there who admires him is a bit like, to an outside observer, what you did was perfectly reasonable, and you did do it by the book. Like, that's just kind of left there a bit, but it's quite interesting. So, we still have a lot to talk about. We still have quite a lot of notes, and we're running quite a bit long. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to wrap this up here. Yeah. We have a lot of things we also will get to later. That later will be in a separate episode. So this is our first two-parter. Well, it was going to happen at some point. And, we've got to sleep at some point. So we'll wrap it there. We'll say thank you for listening to part 1. And keep an eye on your feed for part 2 coming quite soon. It'll be in a week or so. So we'll see you then. Bye. Thank you for listening to Dining Table Discworld. You can find us on Facebook at www.facebook.com/Dining Table Discworld. You can also find us on BlueSky at dtdiscworld. All our other contact information and credits for our music can be found in our show notes. Thank you for listening again, and we'll see you in our next episode.